Good evening. My name is Joan Siegel. Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County, Maryland's program, Ranked Choice Voting, Greater Choice, Stronger Voice. We know our voice is our vote, but can we express our opinions about several candidates who may be vying for the same position? Must we always restrict our choices to one option, or is there a system that allows us to weigh in on several alternatives using the same ballot? The answer is yes, and it's called ranked choice voting. Tonight's panelists will give us insight into how this system works and what it would take to implement it across Montgomery County. But first, let's go over a few housekeeping details. This webinar is presented to you this evening by the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County. The meeting is being recorded and is also being live streamed to Facebook. The recording will be made available at a later date on our YouTube channel, and the links are in the chat box. The audience will be muted throughout the webinar. After our speakers make their presentations, we will have a question and answer session. We encourage all of you to ask questions. To submit a question, click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, then type your question into the box and hit send or return. We want to remind everyone who uses this function to be respectful of our speakers and of each other. We will answer as many questions as time allows. The program is scheduled to end at 8:30. Now I'm pleased to introduce tonight's speakers. Our first speaker is Michelle Whitaker. Michelle is a member of the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County and the statewide coordinator for Ranked Choice Voting, or RCV, Maryland. She's on the board of Represent Women, a group that researches and advocates for more women in elected positions and for gender parity across all levels of government. Michelle also has experience mobilizing at the state and local levels to increase ranked choice voting in Maryland elections. Deb Otis is our next speaker. She's a senior research analyst at FairVote in their government affairs department, and she's a founding member of Voter Choice Massachusetts, which is the campaign to make ranked choice voting available statewide there. She now works on electoral reform at the national level. Deb's research focuses on political polarization, representation for women and people of color, election recounts, runoff elections, and the Electoral College. Our final speaker is Curtis Antonucci, who represents Ward 2 on the Board of Elections for Takoma Park, Maryland. He joined the board at the age of 16 while a junior in high school, after Takoma Park passed legislation lowering its voting age. The appointment has led him to become more involved in city government than ever before. Now that I have introduced all of tonight's speakers, I am pleased to invite Michelle Whitaker to begin tonight's program. Michelle?
Thank you. I'm so glad to be with all of you. As Joan mentioned, I'm Michelle and I'm the statewide coordinator for Ranked Choice Voting Maryland. We're a coalition, a grassroots coalition that's been in existence since 2018 to really help educate residents across Maryland about ranked choice voting and different voting method options, and help mobilize folks in their own communities around engagement and opportunities to enact ranked choice voting for cities and for counties. I'm going to share a little bit about what our coalition is doing and why we believe that ranked choice voting is a great option, not only for Montgomery County, but for local jurisdictions and maybe even statewide if that's the will of the people. So oftentimes people ask, why is there a need? Why are cities, counties, and states turning to ranked choice voting as a solution? What we see often, and we saw this in previous elections, the primary in 2018, in 2014, and going back and back, that many times there are situations where the voters want to be able to fully express their votes and their expression of who they want to see in office, but they're limited, and the way that they vote ends up reflecting a strategy on picking who should be the winner in a way that's not really showing the full breadth of the electorate. When we have ranked choice voting, it really is an opportunity for all voters to express all of their choices and to have those choices then reflected in the outcome of the election. When we look at our past elections, we can see that one of the great things is that Montgomery County has had an abundance of candidates who have run for office. When we look at the executive race, the county executive race for the Democratic primaries, we've had 3 candidates run in 2006, 3 candidates in 2014, 6 candidates on the Democratic side in 2018. And then when we look at the council side, for the council at large, we've had numerous candidates run for the county at-large seats, including in 2018 with 33 candidates running for the at-large seats. We don't want to deter anyone from running for office because you never know who's going to be that person who really represents the community, brings a new voice to the council, new ideas that our community, our council really needs. But we do need a system that helps everyone fully express their vote, and that's ranked choice voting. With ranked choice voting, it's a system that allows voters to rank their candidates in order of preference, so your first choice, your second choice, and so on. And those rankings are used to elect the candidate that best represents the constituents. All first choices are counted, and then if there's a winner who has a majority of the vote in a single winner election, that person is elected, just like in any other election. But if no one has a majority of the vote, that's where ranked choice voting kicks in, and you basically have an instant runoff where we eliminate the candidate in last place, but those voters have the opportunity to have their voice still heard for the candidate that is now eliminated to have their second choice considered in the race. And you continue to do that until someone has a majority of the vote and wins in the election. It's a way that really transforms the way that both candidates run for office and how voters are able to interact with candidates. You have less negative campaigning. You have voters who really can vote for the candidate of their choice, of their preference, and not feel like they have to do strategic voting. You have situations where people don't feel like there's a candidate who's a spoiler. No one should be a spoiler in the election. This should be about ideas and people coming together on those ideas. And that's what's happening when we see ranked choice voting being used across the country in over 22 jurisdictions and more jurisdictions coming online. We also know that there's precedence in Montgomery County for using ranked choice voting. The Right to Vote Task Force recommended ranked choice voting as one of their proposals in their report that went out in 2014. One of the recommendations was that we needed to make sure that there were improvements made to our election system to allow for us to tabulate ranked choice voting results. I'm pleased to announce that because of advancement in election systems, we don't have to worry about updating our system because the current system that Maryland uses is already ready and capable for ranked choice voting elections. So we're already ready and can start using this for county elections, for local elections, and as Curtis will share later, how it is being used in cities in Takoma Park right now. Right now, we have at the state level enabling legislation for Montgomery County so that they can evaluate using either ranked choice voting or approval voting, another voting method that is appealing to allow for voters to fully express their votes. This was sponsored by Delegate Polakovich Carr and 8 members of the Montgomery County delegation. It was just introduced in the House, and so the House bill number is 362, so you can look that up and see the full language of the bill. The Montgomery County delegation passed it unanimously, and we're waiting for the Ways and Means to schedule the hearing for the next steps of the bill in order for that process. This enabling legislation is just about giving the county the ability to evaluate and determine what, if any, changes they'll make to voting systems in the future for future elections. It does not mandate that the county has to use it, but it gives them that next step, that ability, since the Right to Vote Task Force has recommended it, for them, the county, to take the next action if they choose to be able to implement ranked choice voting or approval voting. But there's also things that we can do at the local level, and that's bringing ranked choice voting to our cities. You'll hear more about Takoma Park that is already using it, but unlike counties in Maryland, cities can enact and make changes to their voting methods. without enabling legislation from the state. The only exception to this is Baltimore City, which follows the same, is considered a jurisdiction like a county. And so they still need enabling legislation, but all other municipalities are able to enact it on their own, usually through a charter revision that can go through a petition process or legislative action at the council level. Because there's been so much energy of what's happened across the country in places like Maine enacting it statewide, New York being one of the largest jurisdictions to adopt ranked choice voting and use it most recently in their primary election, we have boards of elections in Maryland who are already reaching out to our coalition to ask questions, to learn more about it, and to see if this is a solution for their community and for their elections. And we're excited to continue that conversation. And we hope you'll be part of that as well. If you're interested in bringing ranked choice voting to your municipality, we'd love for you to reach out to me, any member of our coalition, so that we can continue the work. And I want to just say thank you to the League of Women Voters, who's been a strong supporter, ally, and partner in our coalition as we're doing both legislative action, but also mobilizing members to do the work on this. Ranked choice voting is one of those solutions that helps us, especially in a place where we have public financing that allows more candidates to run from different parts of our community. We need systems that also help us vote and fully express our vote in the election. So I look forward to the questions, and I will pass it back on to Joan.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And as a reminder, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. And now it is my pleasure to invite Deb Otis to give us her presentation. Deb.
Thank you, Joan. So my name is Deb Otis. I work for FairVote. We are a ranked choice voting and proportional representation nonprofit advocacy organization. And so I work in the research department there. And that means that one of my key job functions is to analyze results from ranked choice voting elections. So today, one of the things I want to share with you is how ranked choice voting has been working in practice around the US. Michelle did a great job of the intro to why we need ranked choice voting and what are some of the promises of this reform. I want to show you how it's actually been going. And then I also want to talk about the proportional form of ranked choice voting. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. One of the things I really like about doing ranked choice voting research is that it's a known quantity. Ranked choice voting is used by 10 million voters around the country, or 10 million voters have access to it. And we have data from hundreds of real world ranked choice voting elections. So we don't have to worry about whether this is going to be rolling the dice if someone wants to implement this. This has withstood legal challenges, and we have the evidence of how campaigns and how voters interact with ranked choice voting. So I'm going to show you a few of the key points that myself and other researchers have been finding from around the country. One of them, one really interesting one here, is that ranked choice voting improves representation. This is for women and for people of color and for independent and third-party candidates. So we get gender representation, racial representation, ideological representation. And so some of my research has focused on the impact on women and people of color. And so we have evidence from our own analysis, as well as from numerous peer-reviewed academic studies, that ranked choice voting leads to more diversity in the candidate fields, and then also more diversity among the people that win these elections. And so some of the reasons for this, some possible reasons are more positive campaigning can be more friendly to newcomer candidates who might be, folks outside of the current political establishment, like women, like candidates of color, like third-party candidates. So the positive campaigning is probably one, and ending the vote splitting is a big one. Right now, we have qualified candidates who choose not to run at all. Maybe they're told that the establishment is not behind them. If you run right now, you might just harm another similar candidate. So, sit back and wait your turn. And we get qualified candidates who are weeded out before they even get a chance to enter the race. And ranked choice voting allows multiple candidates, even people who potentially appeal to the same base of voters, allows those candidates to jump in the race and give it a shot to try to connect with the voters and try to win. And so these are some of the reasons why ranked choice voting has been good for diversity. I want to show you a couple of more findings. One over here, in ranked choice voting, voters report that they like ranked choice voting. They want to keep it and they prefer it over their prior voting methods. And people use the rankings. This is one of my favorite things to see. You know, an election reform is like ranked choice voting is only going to be as good as if voters will use it. If folks showed up to a ranked choice voting election and only ranked one candidate, then we'd be right back where we started. But the good news is ranked choice voting creates incentives for voters to express their honest preferences, which means we see strong rates of using these rankings. Most voters will rank multiple candidates in highly competitive or highly publicized, high profile races. It's often as high as 90% of people using multiple rankings. So this is great news. One more point here. RCV elects winners with broad support. And so we've talked about how vote splitting can sometimes lead to a candidate who does not have the support of most voters. Ranked choice voting, the winners tend to have even more support than that majority that we're talking about. We like to measure, for a ranked choice winner, how many voters ranked that person in their top 3 choices. This is a measure of opt-in consensus support. We tend to see that 73% of voters, it's a median there, typically rank the winner in their top 3. So these are voters now who voted for the winner. They're more engaged. They check the news the next day and they see, oh, my person won. And now they are engaged with this race and they have expressed support for that winner. So this is great for broadly supported winners and voter engagement. We will quickly do 2 more points and then move on. Number 1, we touched on this already, positive campaigning. In ranked choice voting, you could get penalized if you go too negative. You might know you need some second choice or third choice votes in order to build that winning coalition. And so we really do see more positive campaigning. This is from anecdotes, what voters and candidates say. And it's also from studies, like studies looking at the words that are used in campaign advertisements. And so that's great news for all of us, right? Break out of this toxicity cycle, lower the temperature a little bit. And lastly, in many cases, ranked choice voting saves money by eliminating runoff elections. This typically happens in municipalities that do 2-round runoffs. When you do ranked choice voting locally, you can consolidate those 2 elections into one. You will save you will spend half of the money. So saving a huge amount of taxpayer dollars there, which tends to be a great option for cities that use 2-round elections. Keep that budget in check. So these are some of the things that we have found and that myself and my organization research. So I hope that is a nice complement to the content that Michelle shared about how ranked choice voting, about how it works and how to help expand it even further. The second half of my presentation is on proportional ranked choice voting. So this is sort of the level up. So what we've mostly talked about today is the single winner version, but for myself and for FairVote, we are very, very interested in this proportional version. And now proportionality can only occur when you're electing multiple people, right? There's no such thing as a proportional governor, it's just one person. But if you're electing a state legislature, a city council, or US Congress, we are electing many people. And so we look at these charts. We have, the different colored people here represent different political viewpoints. And if we have diverse viewpoints in the population, we would like to elect representatives that represent all of those factions in roughly equal proportion. And so I briefly wanted to touch on the problems with electing multiple members if you don't use some kind of proportionality. Now, I know that Maryland elects has state house districts that elect multiple people from the same district. And so I want to show a chart of a phenomenon that we see sometimes if you don't elect proportionally. So I came up with this example that it's supposed to sort of represent two parties here. We've got the purple party and the orange party. If we look at these two purple candidates, they're, these first place and last place, together, that's about 60% of voters that want a purple candidate. But if this is a district that's electing 3 members and they only elect the people with the 3 people with the most votes, they're going to elect 1 purple and 2 orange. And this is a majority of voters not earning a majority of representation. And so this kind of butts up against our idea of majority rule and fair representation, right? And so this can happen if you have multiple people elected from the same district without going proportional. We look at that big purple bar, 50% of people liked candidate A the best. Well, we have to ask ourselves, candidate A was really popular. Good for them. They're doing a great job connecting with voters, but are they so popular? Are there enough voters that want that kind of candidate that they really should have 2 seats? That's why we need proportionality. And so proportional ranked choice voting has all of these benefits that we already talked about with single winner, but it comes with some bonus benefits. We'll go through these kind of quickly. Here's a picture of Louisiana. If you divide this into multi-winner districts, this is US Congress, 6 nasty gerrymandered districts into 2 clean proportional representation districts. So this reduces the impact of gerrymandering. Each American has multiple representatives instead of just 1. This means almost every single district in the country would elect at least 1 Democrat and at least 1 Republican if you did districts this way. And this means more of us have someone that we connect with who's representing us. You have that congressperson that you can call up and who's looking out for you. This creates more competitive districts. It's the end of, some districts matter because they're swing districts and everyone else gets ignored because they're a safe district. This creates space for representatives from outside the 2-party system. And I won't say this is all of a sudden going to make everybody best friends, but it creates an incentive for some collaboration with another party because you share the same district, you share the same constituents. So it can help a little bit. At least you'll have a phone line open, even if you're not best friends. So who tends to benefit from any proportional representation? Tends to be the second largest group. Whoever almost won is now going to get a seat at the table. They won't win a majority of seats, but they might get 1 seat. And so we have more diversity of voices. We'll talk about thresholds real quick. Depending on how many people you elect, the threshold to win a seat is different. We've already talked about single winner ranked choice voting. That's what you see here. If you're electing 1 seat, then someone needs 50% of the votes. That's half the votes, right? We've discussed that already. What if you're electing, say, 3 seats? Then you need 1/3 of the, 1/4 of the vote. I misspoke. You're electing 3 seats, you need more than 25% of the vote. And so I have the numbers here up through 5 seats. Once you get to electing 5 people at a time, then your threshold is low enough that you can get pretty close to proportionality and really get good diversity of voices. I'm a little bit over time because I'm excited and I can talk about this forever, but I do want to get to our most fun portion of this. So I'm skipping ahead a little bit. Apologies for this. I want us to do a little interactive ranked choice voting election. So I'm going to type in the chat a link here. Go ahead and click on that. Everyone can vote on your own computer, or you can vote on your phone. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you might have to type this URL in. Go ahead and do that, and I can pause for just 1 minute to let folks vote. If you click that, you're getting a little election to vote on favorite pizza toppings. So I'm gonna sort of pause here for a minute. Everyone, please vote. The more votes we get, the more fun the results are going to be. So I'll give you just a moment, and then we'll go through the results together. Thanks for voting, everyone. If you have questions on this part, if you're having any trouble with rankit.vote. Let us know in the chat or Q&A. I might be able to help you troubleshoot. All right, we're going to do just 20 more seconds of voting, and then we will go look at the results together. I saw someone put in the Q&A, could we elaborate or clarify on the relationship between RCV and single and multi-member districts? Since I got into the multi-member districts here, I could briefly talk about that while folks are finishing their voting. Ranked choice voting is great because it offers consistency for single winner and multi-winner elections. The voter experience is the same, just rank the candidates in order of your preference. The difference is for single winner, you're electing just one, so you need someone with more than 50% support. For multi-winner, we are electing a proportional group, so that threshold is a little lower. You might need, say, 25% of the vote or 17% of the vote, depending on how many people are being elected. And so that threshold is different. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hop over to election results. So I'm gonna X out of my slideshow. I'm gonna switch tabs over to my election. I'm gonna refresh this page and see how many people have voted. All right, I have a blue bar here that says 59 votes. So this ought to be fun. Oh, they're still coming in. Okay, I'm gonna click results though. So anybody after this, we're not gonna see your vote. I'm sorry. I'm gonna click view results. Okay, and it tells me at the top, mushroom, veggie combo, and cheese pizza are our winners. But let's look at how proportional RCV votes are counted. So this is round one. We're electing 3 winners. So I have this line for 25% out here. This is my threshold in a 3-winner election. So we're going to elect people once they have crossed that threshold. Right now, nobody has crossed the threshold. You all know about this. This is just like single winner RCV. We're going to eliminate whoever's in last place. So I'm going to click on C round 2 and move forward. We eliminated, scroll down, here we go. We eliminated anchovies, and the folks who picked anchovies goes to count for their second choice. It looks like we have an anchovy mushroom contingent here. So we're waiting for 3 people to cross that 25% threshold. It hasn't happened yet. So I'm going to eliminate the person in last place here. So I'm going to click C round 3. We're doing another elimination. We have eliminated sausage. You may have seen there was a tie here. This app breaks ties randomly. In a real election, luckily ties don't happen very often because you get so many voters voting. In this case, this was broken randomly. And so the sausage votes are transferred. Now we have something fun. Mushrooms wins one of our 3 pizzas. Congrats, mushrooms. But they got more votes than they needed. Do you remember when I showed the slide where when one candidate gets too many votes, sometimes that can prevent proportionality? So let's see how we deal with that. In proportional ranked choice voting, when someone gets too many votes, we also redistribute those away. So when I clicked round 5 here, that little extra bit, mushroom had more than they need. And so we wouldn't want those mushroom voters to feel like, oh, I wasted my vote. Mushroom could win without my help. So that vote would have been just as wasted. We transfer surplus votes in this method. We still don't have our 25% or 3 winners yet. So I'm going to do another elimination. In this case, we eliminated vegan pizza, and those people liked veggie pizza, mostly as a second choice, although we saw a few people go into green peppers. Now we've got 2 winners. Let's decide on our 3rd winner. We're getting close here. First up, the veggie people have a little bit more votes than they need. So we transfer surplus. Okay, so those extra veggies have fallen off, and it looks like it helped out cheese a lot and maybe pepperoni a little bit. Oh, actually, excuse me, I'm going back 1 round. It looks like we went ahead and did an elimination. I apologize for possibly doing these in the wrong order. We eliminated meat combo, and this helped out cheese and pepperoni. Okay, we're getting close. Next. There we go. Now we transferred those surplus votes from veggie. Apologies, I sort of went in the wrong order, it looks like. Okay, so we just need one more winner now. I'm going to eliminate green peppers. Sorry, peppers. Okay, a lot of those green pepper people went to transfer to cheese, and now cheese has crossed the threshold. We have 3 winners, and so this is going to be our proportional winners. And so I hope that everyone's happy with these. Of the 61 of us, I think a lot of us are going to be happy if this is our pizza table. And so that's how proportional RCV works. If any questions come in, we'll be happy to talk more about the thresholds here, and why the threshold is 25%, or why we transfer surplus votes. I think the key thing to remember is if you don't transfer surplus votes, then you could end up not proportional, because all of your votes could get clustered on one really popular candidate. And then all of the other winners could be people with very low support. So that's why we transfer surplus. It's still a 1 person, 1 vote system. Your vote counts exactly 1 time. That's why it's sometimes called single transferable vote. But just like regular single winner RCV, sometimes your vote might count for your second choice if your first choice doesn't need your vote to win. So I hope that was clear. That is how proportional ranked choice voting works in practice. Next time we all get together, hopefully in person, when this COVID situation is a little better off, we should have a big old pizza party now, because we know what we want. I'm going to unshare my screen and hand things back over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deb. I hope everybody had dinner before they joined us, because if not, they're probably feeling hungry. I know I am. So we will now, I'm pleased to invite Curtis Antonucci to present to us this evening. And as a reminder, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. Curtis, go ahead, please.
All right, thank you. Hi, my name's Curtis Antonucci. I first joined the Tacoma Park Board of Elections back in 2017. However, that was not quite the start of Tacoma Park's experience with ranked choice voting. Tacoma Park first used ranked choice voting previously in special elections, although it never needed to use instant runoff in any of its proper elections. One example of which is the special election it held back in 2014 for its Ward 3 election, which I will share a little bit of info on right here. What we're looking at right now is the ballot for the Ward 3 special election back in 2014. As you can see, right down here, I assume you can see my cursor, there were a total of 3 different candidates running. Jeffrey Noel Nussbaum, Roger Schlegel, and Kate Stewart. Although I was not involved with the board at the time, I know a little bit about the election. This was one of those elections where none of the candidates were able to get a majority in the first round. Although Roger Schlegel and Kate Stewart were both very close, they both were just shy of that 50%. Ultimately, the writing candidates and Jeffrey were both eliminated, and I believe Kate ended up winning by only a very narrow margin. In this ballot used right here, you can see what is probably very familiar to those of you who are familiar with ranked choice voting, which is this almost sort of grid down to the right of the candidates, where there are different columns for each ranked choice. So for example, if I wanted to vote for Jeffrey Noel Nussbaum, I would bubble in the first small circle on the top left. Then for my second choice, I would then have to go 1 column to the right and bubble my next person that I'm voting for, and to go across the whole way. This is a design you're probably going to see again in a minute, because now I'm going to move on to the 2017 election. So I first joined only very briefly before the start of the election. I was only eligible as of the summer before, when I turned 16 and became capable of joining the board. And so I was only there for a couple months beforehand as an official member, which meant that I was only really there for some last minute planning, but part of that planning was finalizing our ballot design for the 2017 election. And so I'm going to show off one of those ballots right now. This right here is the Takoma Park 2017 Ward 2 ballot. It is divided into two sort of halves here. The top half with the black box with a 2 in it is the mayoral part of the ballot, while the part with the red box with a 2 in it is for the city council vote. Although it isn't shown in the actual PDF, in the actual real ballot, the middle was actually perforated. So when distributing the ballot to voters, you would rip it in half and basically turn it into 2 different ballots. Up top, we can see that there is the mayoral election. It was an uncontested race that year. And actually the one candidate who was there, aside from the write-in, you can see is the same Kate Stewart from the 2014 election. But down below is the actual city council race. Ward 2 was the only city council race to have more than 2 candidates running, at least in 2017, which was very exciting for me, as I am representing Ward 2 on the Board of Elections right now, and obviously have been. So we were expecting a significant amount of Ward 2 turnout just because it was such a contested election. You might recognize that they used basically the exact same system of the different columns, although rather than requiring things to be fully bubbled in, merely a checkbox or an X or some other indication of having voted was required. We were not very picky, as I'm going to talk more about later. You can see that there are 4 different options marked to use: first, second, third, and fourth choice. Technically, the fourth choice isn't really required, as the 1 through 3, you should be able to mark your favorite 3 options that way. But for ease of reading and just understanding the concept, we ultimately decided that the 4th row would be helpful as well. So this is the ballot that we ended up using for the election. We also, because this isn't as simple as simply taking a box, we did end up needing to prepare in advance, looking over the city code to judge different ballots to see what would happen if someone marked incorrectly, how we would count it. This right here is a sheet we put together prior to the election, kind of as a clarifying indicator of exactly how certain forms of incorrect voting could be counted. I'm not going to go through all the different pages of different edge cases and stuff, but I do want to bring your attention specifically to 2 kinds of voting that ended up being like an extra big problem overall. The first kind would be overvoting, as you can see right here. In the case where someone marks more than 1 time in a single choice option line, suddenly it becomes very difficult to tell who the voter actually wants to vote for. In the case of someone marking 2 in the same row, we basically have to immediately discard the ballot. We have to exhaust it because we don't know who to place it for, and we basically can't use it any longer. However, what we can do, as you can see in the overvoted second ranking option, is that we still can count a ballot even if it is overvoted on a future line. That's kind of an ongoing theme. Even if a voter messes up, their second or third choice option, we still don't have any problems counting the first option. It's just that we have to exhaust the ballot after that first person is eliminated, if that is the case. So in this case right here, there would be no problems voting for, casting this ballot for Betsy Lindsay, or Lindy rather. But if the write-in candidate didn't do a good job with other voters, we couldn't then cast this ballot for another candidate. Another one that I want to call attention to is the skipped ranking option. Again, if a ranking is completely skipped, it becomes very difficult to tell who a voter was voting for. Although it might seem intuitive to simply skip past the blank section to the next available checkmark, that could end up being the wrong option. It's hard to tell whether this voter in this example right here would have meant to check George Brown as their second option, or whether Mary Smith was supposed to be the second option but was moved into the third option. Since there's no way for us to tell, after there is a skipped ranking, we simply have to exhaust the ballot. There are a few other edge cases, but those are the main ones that really cause a problem for this form of ballot. Having people mark the same person to vote for in like the first or second option and second option isn't a problem at all, because we can just count them for the first, and if the individual is eliminated, then of course it's not a problem anymore. So that was all preparation for the election, laying out this system, because again, although we had briefly used ranked choice voting for special elections, instant runoff had never been a thing in full-on Takoma Park elections. This was a new thing to happen, so we wanted to make it as intuitive as possible for voters to use. That was one of the big challenges we faced. And so we felt like making it in this way was the best option. During the actual election itself, I mean, it was a great experience for me being able to work there, but there was only really one event that had anything to pertain to ranked choice voting specifically. I had the personal experience of helping out a voter like in the voting booth with their ballot. And although I signed a piece of paperwork, that means I can share almost no information on the actual event. It was a kind of rewarding experience being able to help a confused voter through our system. Again, a bit of added complication is somewhat of a necessity to allow for ranked choice voting, but I was able to help someone out regardless of that, which, I don't know, I liked. After all the ballots were cast, we, back in 2017, used a in-person counting system. Basically, we had to go through and by hand count every individual ballot with the help of all of our wonderful election staff. Although since then, Takoma Park has moved to using a scanner in the 2020 election. It was a really big undertaking, especially with the new method, which made the whole counting process a bit intense. But we ended up coming up with some really interesting results specifically for Ward 2, which again was kind of what a lot of people were paying attention to. As you can see here, with Cindy DeBala, Joe Edgell, and Ashley Nugent, in the first round, no individual candidate was able to get that 50%. In the first round, Cindy DeBala ended up getting a total of 46.8%. Ashley Nugent trailed with 39%. Joe Edgell only got 14%, with only 0.2% of candidates, of voters putting in write-in as their first option. Of the, I think 125 votes between Joe Edgell and the write-ins that were gotten rid of, 72% we then applied to the second round of voting for either Cindy or Ashley. In the end, Cindy DeBala was able to win, meaning that although the end result was not changed, she did end up as people's second choice to claim the majority. And the majority of the people whose votes were discarded in the first round were placed for Cindy DeBala. After the election, we then had the fun experience of going through some of the ballots that could not be counted during the actual night of counting. There was a whole section of ballots put to the side because the way that they were marked was confusing or unintuitive and required more intensive judging. The amount of ballots that were actually put to the side was not enough to influence the election, even if they had all been for Ashley, ultimately. But for the purposes of reporting, the board still went through and judged whether or not these votes could be counted, using the system that I talked about briefly before. In Takoma Park, whenever judging ballots, especially when using a system like this, determining voter intent is incredibly important. As a voting process gets more confusing, we want to make sure, as best we can, not to exclude any voters unless absolutely necessary. Which means that in any cases where a voter obviously messed up, we still want to keep their ballot counting if at all possible. Again, I can't really go through the specifics of each individual ballot we looked at. There were many times when we assessed a ballot that was marked incorrectly, but due to the way that a voter did it, it was, beyond a reasonable doubt obvious that they were trying to vote for a specific candidate or mark their ballot in a specific way. I think a specific example of this that ended up coming up once or twice was something called the write-in with no other marks, where essentially if an individual fills out the write-in section of their ballot, but doesn't actually mark any of the options, we are still allowed to count it as a vote for the write-in candidate, just because it's clear that a voter would never write in a candidate just to turn in a blank ballot. It's clear that they, wanted to vote for this person to some extent, and that seems reasonable to us, so we'll choose to count it anyway. That's just one example, but a lot of our judging was based off of that general concept. And that is essentially the logistics surrounding our 2017 election. It was obviously very formative for me as the first time I was judging an election, but it is not the only election that we have had. The 2020 election was interesting for its own ways, but although we were prepared for a ranked choice voting system, very similar to the one we used the previous year, or the previous election, none of our races ended up having more than 2 candidates, meaning that there is very little interesting information to share as of the 2020 election, at least in Takoma Park. Ultimately, I think the kind of takeaway from this is that we in Takoma Park have been able to create a successful ranked choice voting election. We haven't had any significant problems in terms of allowing our voters to understand the ballots and to fill them out effectively. And we have had specific cases where instant runoff has come into effect. However, it's kind of hard for us as a relatively small, although very active city to use a ranked choice voting to the best of its ability, just because we do have a limited candidate pool. I think Takoma Park should really be used as a sort of proof of concept. We have proven that it can work and that it is at least somewhat useful and not too much of a hassle to use effectively. And now hopefully other people can look at us, see that we've succeeded, and then use ranked choice voting even more effectively than we have. And yeah, that's it. Back to you, Jen.
Thank you very much, Curtis. We will now move into the question and answer portion of the evening. There are a number of questions already in the Q&A box. And we'll get to as many of these questions as time allows. We are scheduled to end at 8:30. One of our speakers, our first speaker, has to be, has another commitment at 8. And so I'm going to go back to Michelle and ask her questions first so that she can answer them. The first question, Michelle, was whether ranked choice voting makes it easier to manipulate voting because organized groups can use palm cards to help elect their candidate. And I think that palm cards are sort of cards that people might hand you as you're going in to vote. If that's not correct, if the person who asked that question could clarify, but otherwise I think that's what was meant by that.
Yeah, so I appreciate this question. You can't manipulate the vote because again, each voter goes into the booth and makes their rankings. You can encourage people to rank candidates as their first choice or second choice, and this is what happens now. If you look at past elections in Maine, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the Bay Area, in California, they're doing this, where candidates will go up to someone and they'll be like, I hope I can be your first choice, but if I'm not, I hope that you will mark me as your second choice on your ballot. So a palm card that indicates, you know, here's the first choice, here's the second choice and third choice, you can do that. And if you do that, you have people who are marking all of those candidates that they want to have as their first preference, second preference, and so on. Again, the outcome is based on tabulating the votes to see who comes out on top. And in terms of like having the most first choices and winning the election if it's a single winner, or if you're talking about a multi-winner race, then having that proportionality of those folks who are representing the community and have the broadest support across the electorate winning those seats. But you can't manipulate the election in any way through that. And I know that there was another question that was asked about what the difference between approval voting and ranked choice voting is. And I'll just say very quickly, ranked choice voting is the ranking. So your first choice, second choice, third choice. Approval voting, you're just indicating like you like these candidates. It's somewhat similar to what we already do on our ballot. But there's not the preference to acknowledge like, this is really the candidate that I'm most interested in having be elected to the office, which can be a situation where in jurisdictions that have used cumulative voting, what often can happen is that an approval or cumulative voting system can actually hurt candidates that you most want to see win. And that leads people to do what we also see here in Montgomery County of people saying bullet vote. So just vote for this candidate. And so you're reducing your vote to just one person instead of the candidates that you really want to see, potentially see in office. And again, it goes back to like, why do we need this? And oftentimes in races where you do have multiple candidates, and the examples that Curtis offered in the Ward 2 race, what we've seen in the at-large race for county council, is that you have multiple candidates running, and they do appeal to you. Maybe they are the same issue preferences, maybe they come from the same background as you, whatever it is, and you want to give them a chance. But in the way we vote right now, you have to figure out, well, I think they have the most likelihood to win, so I guess I'll vote for them, even if you're like, I really do like this candidate, but I don't want to spoil the election by voting for that person and electing the person I like the least, or I think is going to harm my community. That's why ranked choice voting exists, because it helps to make sure that you can express your vote and say, here are the candidates that I would like to see in office. And it's similar to a quick example of like, you go to grab coffee, and if your first choice isn't available at the counter, you go to your next choice and you're getting what you want, not like what somebody else is just determining for you without your voice actually being part of the process. So that's the quick answer there.
Thanks, Michelle. There was one other question too, a question about fully expressing your vote. I'll read this to you. Please explain what it means to fully express your vote versus voting for the candidate you want. Maybe you made reference to that in your talk.
It goes back to what I was saying before in terms of if when you have candidates, that more than one candidate that appeals to you, in our current voting system, you'd have to just say that this candidate is the one I like, or that I'm going to vote for. Even if you say like, I like that candidate, I also like this candidate, and this candidate actually, they have the most thorough policy piece, and I would really like to see them in office because they understand the issues. But you're forced to say like, only this one. And what we want is people to be able to fully express their vote and say like, this is my top choice, this is my second choice, and so on.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much, Michelle. Now, there's a number of questions which are very specific about ranked choice voting. So, Deb, I think this one is directed to you. What percentage of areas with ranked choice voting are Democrat majority versus Republican majority? Do you have any idea on that?
At this point, the number of jurisdictions is about even. For a long time, it skewed more blue. It was more Democratic cities that had it, like early adopters were places like San Francisco and Minneapolis. But in the last few years, this has been embraced in a cross-partisan way. And so we're seeing Alaska start implementing this beginning this year with a pretty high profile Senate race up there. We saw a number of cities in Utah. It was 20 cities opted in this year. And most of those are Republican cities. And so it has really evened out as we have seen members of both parties and people who support independent and third party candidates start to understand that this is really about getting the candidate that best matches people's views rather than helping any one particular party. The voters are the winners here, no particular party.
Great, thank you. Curtis, let me ask you this one. What if someone only marks their first choice and doesn't mark any other choices?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So if someone only marks like one choice or two choices after that choice is voted, if the ballot is then redistributed to another candidate, or would be, because their one choice has been canceled, they just completely eliminate it. Those are the 28% of votes that weren't then given to either Cindy or Ashley after the first round were people who didn't mark a second choice. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Deb, there's a question, there seems to be a question about how ranked choice voting improves diversity, better representation. There was another question which asked, how does it prevent or eliminate gerrymandering? So maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So the diversity question, the single winner ranked choice voting, the kind that's used for the most part in the US so far, it improves diversity a little bit. Proportional representation improves diversity a lot. And so on the single winner side, we do see real world evidence of more diverse candidate pools and more diverse winners. A lot of this is just opening up the field to allow more candidates to run. You know, when candidates decide to run, people then will vote for them. And ranked choice voting helps people, helps create incentives for candidates to run without sort of being shamed out of the race. And, you know, we've seen evidence of, you know, vote transfers between candidates who appeal to a specific constituency, like candidates who are appealing to really one issue base. When one of them gets eliminated, votes can transfer to the other one and maybe that other one wins. Whereas in non-ranked choice races, those two similar candidates are just going to split up the base and prevent either of them from winning. So these the rankings and the vote transfers are a method of community power building rather than dividing communities. And then of course, proportional ranked choice voting it has all of those benefits and more because it's electing multiple candidates with that lower threshold. So single winner ranked choice voting, you got to get that 50% to win. Proportional ranked choice voting, maybe you only need 25%. So a group that is not a majority, but is still a sizable portion of the electorate now gets one seat at the table. And that, of course, is great for diversity.
Great, thank you. Curtis, there's a question about whether there was any focus group testing on the format of the ballot. How did Takoma Park determine what format would be the easiest to use? And how did they know that the fourth column would be useful and not confusing?
That is an excellent question. Having a focus group testing stuff would be incredibly cool, but unfortunately, we did not have that. So it is mostly down to a kind of Designing ballots in Takoma Park tends to come down between a sort of cooperation between the Board of Elections itself and some of the city staff that is more focused towards art and design in that sort of way. Often we're provided with different design templates that we're able to choose between and make certain requests to have fitted. I was not on the board when the kind of decision to make the broad decisions in terms of designing the ranked choice voting style was put into place. I mean, I personally think it's rather intuitive and am in favor of sticking with it, but I don't know what the original design process looked like. As for the fourth line being used and being intuitive, that was, generally speaking, just the personal decision decided on by the board. We did need to get that verified by the current city council, along with most of the decisions that we make, because they are ultimately more recommendations than anything else. But no, as cool as a focus group would be, we did not have one of those.
Joan, I have to leave, but I'll just add to that there, because of the advances in ranked choice voting over the last decade or more, we have some great studies that have been done across the country, and actually looking at other countries that are using ranked choice voting to determine the best usability for ballot, not only for the voters' experience in it, but also for accessibility pieces and language accessibility, all of those. So there's lots of great usability studies that have been done. There's an independent organization called the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center, which basically just provides kind of a clearinghouse of that information of those previous ballot studies, information from election officials. So there's additional resources that you can get to understand like what's the best way to create a ballot, especially when you need to factor in large numbers of candidates running. How do you do that with your ranking the choices, what decisions you make, what happens in those situations? And similar to a question I answered in the chat, the Board of Elections, as Curtis was describing their process, does a lot of work before the election on determining the ballot design, how you handle ballots, all of the process that goes into it, that helps to both educate like what the board does, as well as educate voters and candidates on what the voting method is. And this is something that we do even now, even if you're not using ranked choice voting. The Board of Elections is involved in this process of kind of really doing the ballot design, doing those studies, making sure that it's ready to go for the elections coming up. I really do appreciate all the questions, and I'm sorry I couldn't stay on longer, but I hope you'll reach out to me at rcvmaryland.org. Happy to chat with you, happy to do additional presentations for small groups that might be interested. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and thank you for all the thoughtful questions in here, and I hope to continue the conversation.
Thanks, Michelle. We really appreciate your participation. Take care. Okay, so there are a few questions about the pizza poll. Not specifically like why did pepperoni win and not mushrooms or whatever it was, but there's some, like, for example, one of the questions is, why is it 25% and not 33%?
That's a good question, and it's basically a math quirk. So if we're electing 3 people, and each of them gets more than 25%, then you've eaten up more than 75% of the vote pool, right? That's 3 people over 25%. So our total is over 75%. For my math friends out there, you'll know that means the leftover is less than 25%. There is not enough leftover vote for anyone else to then get that same threshold. And so the formula for the threshold is designed such that it's the smallest number where once enough candidates have met it, nobody else can. And so I always just I remember that if you're electing one person, they need 50% of the vote. If you're electing one person, they need 1/2 of the vote. And so going onward, the fraction is always a little bit less than the number, right? And then, so if you're electing 2 people, they need 1/3 of the vote, and so on.
Okay, and I'm going to read this one because I think it is explained pretty well in here. In the pizza example, there were 3 meat choices, and the votes were split between pepperoni, sausage, and meat combo. So none of the meat choices reached 25%. However, if we had added the 3 together, then meat would have been represented. Is this of concern? And if so, how can we address this vote splitting in a real life example?
That's a really good question. And I was thinking about it as we were going through these results, because you know that I stuck those multiple meats and multiple veggies in there to try to see if we would see these coalitions. But when we looked at the result, the meat lovers coalition totally fell apart. Like when the meat combo pizza was eliminated, pepperoni was still in the running, but most of those meat votes transferred to normal cheese. And so meat didn't get representation because the folks that liked meat, their second choice was not meat. And so meat did not have this depth and breadth of support. I will note that the top 3 in first choices, so at the very beginning, round 1, our 3 leaders were the 3 that went on to win. And so meat would not have won under that situation either. Like our traditional, just whoever has the most votes method, that also would not have elected a meat pizza. And so is this of concern? Well, I would say no, because there exists a meat faction, but they were too small to get a seat in 3-seat pizza election. I would say the more seats you're electing at a time, the lower that threshold gets and the more proportional we are. And so I would advocate, if you're drawing districts from scratch, make yourself some 5-member districts instead of 3. And that way groups like MEAT, which was around like 20% of the supporters, can get 1 seat.
Great, thank you very much. Curtis, here's one for you. And it's similar to one I asked you earlier about only marking first choice all the way across. Let me make sure I ask you the one I haven't asked you yet, though. Let's see. Is it okay if someone puts their favorite candidate as first choice for all the choices? Is that possible?
Yes, okay. As in they vote the same person for first, second, third, and fourth choice? Okay. That is called, we call that a duplicate ranking, which is both an incorrect way to mark your ballot, but it's also a kind that is still very easy to interpret and really isn't that big of a deal. Because although we then need to discard your ballot after that first vote, because once you're, if you vote for a single person for all 4 slots, we'll take it, we'll look at your first slot, say, okay, you voted for this person, cast your ballot for them, and then if they're eliminated, we'll look at it again and say, we can't vote this for anyone else because you've only voted for this one person the entire way across, and so we'll exhaust it. So in practice, it ends up being the same thing. It's just voting for your number 1 candidate and no one else, even though it's technically an incorrect way to mark your ballot.
Okay, technically, but the ballot is still cast, it's not discarded.
Yes, for the first round.
For the first round, okay, thank you. So this question, I guess is probably for you, Deb, although Curtis, I don't know, you may want to weigh in as well. Is there any data that ranked choice voting winners who have over 50% of the votes serve better or get more done than winners who have a plurality or the first past the post? Is there any data, I guess is the real question.
I don't know of any research on that question, although you've hit on one of the key points on my research wish list. I would love to see how strong mandates translate into better governance, or perhaps not better governance. But at this point, I don't know of anything, no.
I guess I'll say very similar thing. I have not seen any research on the topic. I am not experienced enough in academia to do any of my own that is sufficient. And all I have is anecdotal evidence from the council members that we currently have who were voted through with these systems. And I'm a bit loath to say how much I like or dislike our current city council members, mostly because I was responsible for them being elected, and that seems a bit unfair.
Fair enough. Okay, I'm going to combine a couple of questions here. And I don't think I understand ranked choice voting well enough to know whether, well, I'm going to just read it as opposed to trying to paraphrase it. How do you choose which votes to transfer when a candidate exceeds the quota is one question. And the other one is, how is it fair to transfer votes if a candidate gets too many? If the candidate earned extra votes, why give them away?
Yeah, I could jump in on those two. So the first question is, when you're transferring votes, how do you decide which ones? It's a very good question. They used to kind of do this randomly before we were doing computer tabulation. And it would be like, oh, we'll take X number of ballots off the top of the stack. And that obviously does not sit well with a lot of reformers, because we want, that introduces some randomness, right? But since folks have started using computer tabulation, when you transfer surplus votes now, it's actually a fractional vote transfer. I know that sounds a little bit alarming. I tend to think of it like, if your vote was $1 and you only needed 90 cents to elect your favorite candidate, then ranked choice voting lets you spend that extra leftover 10% to help out your second choice and see if maybe they can win too. The system is still a one person, one vote system, but if your first choice candidate got more votes than they need, instead of some votes transferring, it's a fraction of every vote transfers a little bit. So it's like a little weight of the vote. There are some good videos out there online of exactly how this works. They're only a few minutes long, but I would encourage you to check one out because it kind of needs a little bit more than my 30 seconds to explain it. But yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad that we have computers now. I believe the second half of that was, why do we transfer surplus and how is it fair to do that? Was that the question? Oh, great. I see Joan nodding.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Let's see.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll remind us of, I showed a slide of what can happen when you elect multiple people and don't use proportional representation. And it showed this one really popular candidate who had way more votes than the threshold. And so they got a seat. But then the other two candidates were people with really low support. And so if you don't transfer the surplus, then you can end up wasting a lot of votes. Imagine, put yourself in the shoes of someone who votes for the popular candidate. You say it's some incumbent who's doing a great job. They're connecting well with their constituents. They're delivering on their promises. Everyone likes them. And so you vote for them. You think they should get reelected. But then the morning after the election, you look at the results and you see, oh, they didn't need my help. They would have won without my vote. I should have voted for someone else. Now you as a voter are feeling regret. It would have been to your advantage then to go vote strategically, and ranked choice voting incentivizes honest voting. And so we transfer those surplus votes away because we have to ask, if so many voters liked this one candidate, is it enough voters that maybe we should get two candidates representing that faction? Is that more fair? And so that's why we transfer some surplus.
Great, thank you. Before I ask the next question, I wanted to just mention, if you have asked a question in the Q&A box, there have been several questions which have been answered by our presenters. So please be sure to check. If I see that it's been answered, I haven't asked it out loud just because I'm trying to get to as many as possible. If I get through all of the unanswered ones, I'll turn to the answered one as well, but others should just check that box too, just in case I don't ask your question out loud. So this question is, again, I think Curtis will have something to say about this, as well as Deb. The question is, how has the use of ranked choice voting affected the proportion of eligible voters who actually show up to vote? So the question for you, Curtis, is have you seen an increase in voter turnout? And then Deb, maybe after he weighs in, you would just comment on that as well if you have any data on that.
So I only have a couple data points to bring up, but I do know that, unsurprisingly, turnout from Ward 2 was very good in 2017. And I mean, not only was it a contested election, but it was a doubly contested election. So it makes some intuitive sense that it would have gotten such good turnout. However, again, we only have like a couple elections where we've performed this, so I can't really extrapolate to a larger setting all that well. Yeah.
I'll add that overall, the question, it's still an open question as to how much ranked choice voting impacts turnout. We have seen for cities that have opted into ranked choice voting in the last few years. A lot of them have had historically high turnout and broken turnout records. But we've also seen that in some non-ranked choice cities over the last few years. As our politics have heated up, we have had high turnout over the last few cycles. And so some analysis that kind of tries to compare these and get at what is ranked choice voting actually impacting turnout, they tend to come up with probably not or not very much. I mean, turnout is driven by things like how competitive is the election and how much media attention it gets and the voters' mood. It's not driven as much by what is the style of the ballot going to look like. And so ultimately, I'd say, turnout's not being harmed by ranked choice, but it's hard to say it's really going to move the needle on our elections on turnout.
Great, thank you. Curtis, this is probably for you. I think you talked a bit about this in your presentation. It looks like there's a much higher chance that a ballot will not be counted because of an error made with ranked choice voting. And it looks like there's a much higher chance of fraud as well, since there will be more boxes left blank in error. Do you agree with that statement?
I would agree that, yes, it is more likely that a ballot will be marked incorrectly. However, I think that my experience in Takoma Park has shown that that increased margin is relatively small. Of course, making a ballot more complicated is going to make it harder to fill out, but we have the ability to make it pretty easy to understand, to provide resources, to make it even easier for individuals. So yes, it is going to be easier to make mistakes. No, I don't think it's significantly an issue. As for fraud, we've had no cases of it in Takoma Park, or at least that we've known about. And if a person accurately marks their ballot, I think there's a limit to how much damage someone could really do if they were somehow able to make additional marks on a ballot. I haven't exactly spent a lot of time talking about the potential for fraud with other members of the board, mostly because we're interested in preventing that, not about the exact specifics of what could happen, but you would need to find someone. The point is, it would be hard and complicated and not especially effective. Of course, it is still a risk, but I don't think it's a significant one.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to read this one as well. This is complicated. I think this one is probably for you, Deb. Is there an issue if the person who got 40% as the highest, but then doesn't move up? Or in that sort of a situation, is there a pattern that a person might be number one on a group of ballots, but ranked very low on the other ballots, so that the majority doesn't want person A, but they are split as to who they want instead? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's exactly why we have ranked choice voting. I think that candidate you're talking about, they got a lot of first choice votes, but they got less than half still, but then no backup choices, so they could never move up and win. That to me sounds like a polarizing candidate. Some people love them, but everyone else is united against them. We have candidates like that in a lot of our elections, and in Plurality, in our current elections, energizing 40% of the base is often enough to win. With ranked choice voting, it's not enough unless you can win some backup choice and pick up some extra votes. If the majority of the electorate is united against you, if they're split between a couple other candidates, ranked choice voting is going to elevate one of those couple other candidates. And I can share some stats on how often that happens. I call it a come from behind win, when the person who is leading in first choices ends up getting passed and they don't go on to win. That's a come from behind victory. And in competitive ranked choice races, it happens about 10% of the time. When I say competitive, I mean races that go multiple rounds to select a winner. And so 1 out of 10 times, we have evidence of vote splitting in real life. That if we didn't have ranked choice voting, a person would have gone on to win with a majority of voters united against them. And so that's how often ranked choice voting is improving who we choose to win. All the time, it's improving things like the tone of campaigns and the diversity of candidates. On top of that, 10% of the time, it's getting us a winner with more broad support.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, what do you think of a none of the above as a choice? So that the voters, I guess, have to get a completely new election?
I don't know. I'll bet Curtis over in the election admin office is already thinking about, oh no, do we have to pay for a second election? Our turnout problems are bad enough. I tend to prefer solutions which will find us a winner in a single round. Curtis, what do you think?
I have a hard time endorsing an option that is simply you know, hold an entire other election with different candidates, I suppose. Although I could be misunderstanding the question. I think that's what a write-in is for. Is if you don't like any of the candidates but still want to vote, find a write-in or look at a write-in candidate. And that's the nice thing about ranked choice voting, is you can put a write-in candidate as your preferred option. And even if they do end up losing, which is fairly likely, you can still have your second choice, your vote go to your second choice option.
Okay, thank you. So this next question is, what's the best way to spread the word about the benefits of ranked choice voting? And for that matter, the pitfalls of the current plurality system? I would say things like this.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways is to get involved with local ranked choice advocacy. So thank you for spending your Monday evening at this webinar, learning more about this and connecting with other RCV supporters. I would also encourage you to get in touch with the local RCV org where you're living. So for those of you that are local to Maryland, that is Ranked Choice Voting Maryland, rcvmaryland.org. They will have ways to plug you into local efforts. If you are from another state, you can find the state RCV groups through FairVote's website, that's fairvote.org, or you can do some Googling and see what ranked choice activity is happening locally. There's plenty of ways to get involved, and any of these groups will be happy to have you.
Great, thank you. There's a question that was asked, and Michelle answered it before she left, so I'd like to read it and also read the answer. Some voters may think they would need to rank all the candidates, and the ranked choice voting is not for them because they don't want to research 5 or more candidates, just pick the 1 or 2 that they like. Do you think making it clear that even with ranked choice voting, you can vote for only 1 or 2 candidates if you want to? And what Michelle wrote is that you don't have to rank all the candidates. You can rank as many or as few as you want. It's your choice and your vote. So I thought that was an important point for everybody to be aware of.
Yeah. Can I actually pitch in on that real quick? I just wanted to note,
please.
In Takoma Park, not only did it say you don't have to vote for more than 1 candidate on all the ballots that I showed, but when individuals are receiving instructions on how to cast their ballot and how to fill it out and everything while voting in person, we say that pretty explicitly, is you don't have to vote for everyone. If you want this to just be mark off your first choice and then your vote is discarded afterwards, we're okay with that. We just want it to be an option. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Curtis. And one other question that Michelle answered before she left: what are the prospects for the ranked choice voting bill for Montgomery County in the Maryland General Assembly, and what can we do to help? So Michelle said, thanks for asking. You can share your support using the RCVMD Ranked Choice Voting Maryland's advocacy tool, and she gave the bill number, which is 362, and the link. So if you go to the Q&A in the answered section, it's about halfway or toward the bottom, and there's a link there to show you support for this bill in Montgomery County. So I'm just taking a quick look to make sure that we've hit all of the questions. Looks like we have one new one that just came in. How long does it take to change voting systems from standard to ranked choice voting? Any thoughts on that?
Depends on how motivated you are. we've seen places pass it and turn around the implementation within a few months to half a year. We've seen other places pass ranked choice voting, and then some places passed it 10 years ago and have not yet implemented it. One of the challenges for ranked choice voting is that sometimes it requires updates to election technology, and that can slow down implementation. If you're using machines, if you're using tabulation voting equipment that was manufactured in the last 15 years or so, congrats, it's already RCV capable. However, if your jurisdiction is using machines that are older than about 15 years, it's likely that it does not have ranked choice capability, and you might need an update before you can start using ranked choice voting. Of course, if your machines are older than 15 years old, there are other issues as well, like security concerns. And so they're probably on schedule to be updated anyway. It might just be a matter of syncing up your RCV implementation kind of with those equipment updates. Curtis, I wonder if you have other thoughts on this timeline.
Not many, but I just want to say, for Takoma Park, it did not take us all that long to start using ranked choice voting. But we also do have the privilege of like very modern voting equipment. So that is definitely a contributing factor. So thank you for pointing that out.
All right, I'm going to throw out one more question before we end. What do you see as the cons to ranked choice voting?
Well, to be honest, this is one of them. You know, it's new. It can feel different to people, and so it takes some education. You know, those of us who are involved in this movement love getting together to talk about ranked choice voting and share what it is and how it works. But you know, there are other political issues out there where you don't have to explain to someone what it is. Folks already know. And so one of our barriers is just making people start thinking about how do we choose our candidates, and could we be doing it better? It's not at the top of most people's minds. And even once a lot of us have thought about it, there are other pressing issues out there. And so, some of us might be prioritizing other issues to spend our time or our money on. I would argue, you know, the reason that I'm spending my career doing ranked choice voting is that I think this plays into all of those other issues. If we can elect representatives who are more accountable to the constituents, who are truly representing us, we can have better elections, then this is how we get movement on all the other issues that are important to us. But you know, kind of the education barrier on this, I'd say, is one of the drawbacks.
I have very little
Curtis,
to add.
any final
That
words?
was very astute. Yeah, I'd just say that I want to make it clear that that kind of difficulty of understanding necessarily the concept or also goes to individual voters. I can definitely understand someone without a in-depth understanding of ranked choice voting looking at one of the ballots I just showed off and being like, what is this? It's not necessarily as intuitive as more quote unquote typical voting systems. And although I do think it is significantly better, there is some barrier to entry, which hopefully we can work together to diminish as much as possible.
Can I share a quick story? I found that often when I talk to, say I'm out canvassing for ranked choice voting, talking to people at an event, back when we used to talk to people in real life, folks would say, oh yeah, well, I understand ranked choice voting. I think it's a good idea, but I'm worried this will be confusing for the voters. I look at them and I'm like, well, you're a voter. You're talking about you? People have this idea, well, I understand it, but my friends and neighbors wouldn't. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, well, I just talked to 20 of your friends and neighbors and they all said the same thing. And so I think we shouldn't underestimate the other voters. You get it, your friends get it, everyone can get it. We just need to tell them what it is and tell them the benefits.
Great. Well, thank you very, very much. That's all the time we have tonight. I know that everyone joins me in thanking our esteemed presenters tonight. Thank you to everyone who's watching tonight. If you enjoyed this free program and want to learn more about the League of Women Voters' work in Montgomery County, including how to support our efforts, you can find us at LWVMOCOMD.org. Again, that's LWVMOCOMD.org. And with that, we'd like to say thank you once more and good night.